You are now experiencing the digital life with Kevin Lockett.
Okay, we're talking to John Kosko from Pro Football Focus. How are you today?
Pretty good. How about yourself, Kevin?
I'm good, but I am intrigued by Pro Football Focus's mock draft because I think you guys, especially when it came to the Browns, especially the 1 and 4 pick, had two guys that I haven't seen in any mock drafts. Like, my eyes have been bleeding because I see the same names over and over. And then I saw, wait a minute, this is actually, I'm intrigued by this one because this is one I actually like. So at the number 1 pick, you selected Baker Mayfield. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so if anybody that follows our draft coverage and pretty much throughout the whole season knows how high we've been on Baker Mayfield. And he's basically, any way you slice the tape, the numbers going to come out to any of our advanced statistics that we have, our advanced charting that we do. Everything that we do is based on the tape, and then obviously the numbers can show where you're good and where you're bad and stuff. And Baker Mayfield shines in every single category. It's quite phenomenal in terms of how farther ahead he is than the rest of the class. You know, he might be second in some categories, but he's first or second in pretty much every single category, and no other quarterback can say that. So, you know, it doesn't matter what the height is for me. And our mock drafts, we're not trying to predict what, you know, John Dorsey or what any of the other teams are going to do. This is if we were a GM of that team, you know, who would we pick? And so as the GM of the Browns, I would take Baker Mayfield. You know, that being said, you know, if the Browns do end up taking Sam Darnold at number 1, which seems to be the consensus, or at least that's getting towards there. We have no idea what's going on with the smoke screen season as it is. That's our number 2 overall guy in this draft. So, you know, I'd be perfectly happy with him going number 1 overall.
It's intriguing. It's intriguing with Mayfield because Scott McLaughlin, who came from the Redskins, is a Mayfield guy. I remember John Dorsey early on, before he was hired by the Browns, said he scouted Baker Mayfield a lot. So it was intriguing during this whole process when I heard, you know, Darnold popped up, but then also Josh Allen popped up. And I get Allen because he has big hands, he got a strong arm. He kind of reminds me in some ways of Derek Anderson. So he has that type of talent. But it's intriguing that Mayfield was not connected to the Browns throughout this whole process. It just seems like people just kind of settled on Darnold and Allen.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't think anybody really knows what John Dorsey's going to do. It really seems like he's keeping it close to the vest in this one because he comes in there to a team that's known for having a lot of leaks within the organization, and he's trying to figure out who he can trust and who he can't. And, you know, I fully expect like the scouting staff to be kind of overhauled within the next, you know, year or so because of that, seeing who he can trust and who he can't. So, you know, you look at this in terms of the roller coaster of who's the high guys and who's low, and, you know, who's being mocked to them, and all the rumors that are coming out. And obviously, I mean, in the beginning, before either one of these guys had a job with the Browns, they were both very high on Baker Mayfield, and that was, I mean, it's well published. So, you know, when he comes out, you know, and he's prepping for the draft, and nobody's mocking him there except for basically Pro Football Focus. There are people out there, but it's very few and far between. It is kind of intriguing that nobody was doing that. You know, they were looking, all right, this guy's 6'4", and this guy has the hand size, and this guy has the quote unquote prototypical look of a AFC North quarterback, so they were mocking him there. It's interesting that Josh Rosen hasn't really gotten any steam to Cleveland either, because he's a guy that would, you know, fit that bill of, you know, he's 6'4", he's got the size, he looks like a pure passer. So it's interesting how it's all shaken out, but really, like, two guys that, you know, a lot of people think are really, you know, one of the top quarterbacks in the draft aren't getting touted to the Browns, but I think that's going to pick up steam here in the next couple of days.
Yeah. So the number 4 pick, you went to a guy that, again, early on in the draft process, I heard his name talked about for the Browns, but it just kind of went away, and it was Derwin James. And I think your colleague, Steve Paluzzi, he said that the next great defensive chess piece is Derwin James. And I started thinking about Greg Williams and how he likes to move around his players. So why did you go with Derwin James at the number 4 slot?
So it came down to trying to actually trade back from there, thinking because the Browns have a lot of needs for their team, and so the more picks you have, the better you can at least address those positions. Well, at PFF, we have so many guys that know the value of having, holding on to draft picks. Nobody was really biting on what I could get for a number 4. So, I started obviously looking at what the positional values were, and at our top guys in their draft. And basically we have Maurice Hurst, Quentin Nelson, and Derwin James all at the top guys in the draft that are non-quarterbacks. And from a positional standpoint, that's for me, it was a no-brainer to get a guy like Derwin James, who is, he's a safety, but he's a guy that can man up tight ends, running back, and slot receivers like nobody's business, and did it at an extremely high level in college. Especially for a guy that's 6'2", 6'3", and his size, he has that athleticism to be able to match with those guys. The Browns are a team that were the worst at covering tight ends and running backs last year. You get a guy that can match up with those guys, and then also be an extremely good run defender and a blitzer off the edge from the slot, from the safety position, whatever it is. This is a guy that can do it all, and he does it at an extremely high level, and he has the athleticism to back it up. For me, it was a no-brainer in terms of having a guy that can do it all. You think of like a Harrison Smith type guy, Landon Collins type guy. He's the type of player that can be that big of a playmaker for the Browns, and I thought it was a no-brainer at that point.
So what's the difference between him and Mika Fitzpatrick? Because early on, Mika Fitzpatrick was projected to go in the top 5, and he's kind of slid during the draft talk. So what's the main difference between those two talents?
So in our eyes, Derwin James is graded better in college than what Fitzpatrick has, and there's no knock on Fitzpatrick. He's just not quite at the level in our eyes as Derwin James is. Fitzpatrick, we have him as a number 2 overall cornerback, which is a number 10 overall prospect in the draft. But he's a guy that he's a little bit smaller. He's a little bit less athletic. He may have a better, instincts and feel for the game, as Nick Saban really, touts that. But he's not a guy that has shown it on a consistent basis like Derwin James is. It's just a smaller step down. But he's a guy that, if the Browns were to take Fitzpatrick, I'd be perfectly happy with that, because he's a guy that can really lock down the slot position, which our numbers have shown recently. We've had our analytics guys really look at how to best defend the pass. Stopping those slot guys is extremely valuable in the NFL, and it's more valuable to have a slot defender to be able to shut down the slot guys as opposed to outside guys, because of how the NFL has evolved in today's game.
So you were pretty heavy with the defensive backfield for the Browns, because you went James in the first round, and in the second round you took Greg Stroman, and in the fifth round you took Avonte Maddox. So do you think, because here in Cleveland, they're just talking clearly about quarterbacks. Everybody's talking about the quarterbacks, but do you think their biggest need, probably next to quarterback, is the defensive backfield?
So when the way you win in today's game, obviously you have to have that quarterback. So once you get that quarterback in place, the next biggest need that wins games for you is the secondary, being able to stop the pass. And the best way to be able to do that is to have elite players, or at least the talent to be able to do it in the secondary. A lot of people talk about having an edge, pass rush to be able to do that, but most pass rushers don't get there until 2.5 seconds into the drop back. And you can get rid of the ball. You have more than 50% of your passes are out before 2.5 seconds. So you have to have elite guys beating guys from the interior in less than 2.5 seconds to get to the quarterback. And it's not an easy task to do. A lot of guys, look at even Von Miller or J.J. Watt or even Aaron Donald. These guys aren't creating pressure at a 50% clip or anything like that. They're doing it at 20%, at max, maybe 25% on their best days. And so what are you going to do the rest of that time when you're not able to get the pressure? You have to have a secondary to be able to do that. So I doubled up on cornerback, and Stroman is an athletic guy from Virginia Tech, had some ridiculous pass coverage numbers. He allowed just a pass rating of 26.8. And a catch, only allowed 25% of his targets to be caught in this past year. So I put him in there as a guy that, he's our 10th, 12th best cornerback in this draft. Obviously at pick 64, I had to do something about cornerback. I wanted to get that unit solidified. Then in Avonte Maddox in the fifth round, thought he was another guy that had put up some really impressive tape, really athletic, definitely a smaller guy, but just another piece just to put some talent on that secondary. Maybe he's a guy that can make the team, maybe not, but it's still something that I wanted to get addressed, because really until you know that you have this elite, or just at least one of the top units in the NFL, you really need to keep adding new pieces to that to try to improve it, because it's just that important.
Right. Now, go back to the second round. You took DJ Moore with the second round pick, which I think that could happen. They signed Landry, and you hope Josh Gordon at least comes close to where he was before. But I do think they'll probably will take a wide receiver early. But tell me about Tavian Bryan, because that's a name that doesn't pop up too often, and he's an interior defensive lineman. Tell me about him.
Yeah, so this is out of Florida, defensive tackle that you can really move around on the defensive line, but he's a disruptor. He's our number 3 the defensive tackle in this class behind Maurice Hurst and Vita Vea, but he's definitely a guy that's going to be the second best interior defender in terms of pass rushing ability. If you want to see his best games, turn on the Texas A&M game or the South Carolina game, and he just destroyed the offensive lines there. It was really impressive, and that's what you think that he might be able to become. He was pretty solid the rest of the year, but this is a guy that just got after it in terms of the pass rush and in the run game. Every single season of his career, he's improved in both those categories. Pass rushing productivity of 9.7, which is taking all the sacks, hits, and hurries into consideration, which was 10th best in the class, which and in the SEC, which is a pretty solid number. So this is a guy that I think has obviously put up really impressive combine numbers as well. So athleticism and the tape match, and I thought it was a good spot, and especially when you consider that the defensive tackle position really drops off in this class. I thought I needed to get that addressed pretty quickly.
Right. So your mock draft is fun because you guys made a lot of trades. You made 2 trades with the Browns. Because I was looking at how you traded, they're like, oh wow, they've done the 5th round. They're those 6th round picks and 7th round picks. So it's interesting how you guys put together the trades. But the biggest thing is there was no running backs. You did not take a running back. After I fell off the floor, I was like, wait a minute, where's the running back? So what was your decision? Because this is a deep running back class. What was your decision? I know that Duke Johnson's fantastic. I think Duke Johnson's an underrated player, and they got Carlos Hyde, but the decision not to draft a running back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Duke Johnson is a guy that I really, really like for the Browns, and he's a guy that just needs to get more touches in general. But you signed Carlos Hyde to a rather large contract for a running back, and I know that you can get out of it pretty quickly after a year. But when it comes to running backs, these are guys that if the right one would have fallen to me in the 3rd round, I would have maybe pulled the trigger. But my philosophy on running backs is that they're kind of a dime a dozen, unless you don't need to take one in the 1st round and early, and especially for me, it was the 2nd round as well, because it's a kind of a plug and play position. If you just spend, say, a 2nd round pick on a guy and he gets injured, say like Dalvin Cook last year for the Minnesota Vikings, that was kind of obviously he was looking towards that he was going to have a really good year, but they lost that. That's a kind of a lost draft pick, and they also traded up for that. That could have been used on a position like in the secondary to solidify a much more important need than what they did. So, like, in my eyes, you have to be able to pass the ball, which is obviously quarterbacks, wide receivers, and then pass protection. And you have to be able to stop the pass, which is the secondary, and then the pass rush. And the running backs are kind of an ancillary piece to that, and they're the least valuable position pretty much on the offense. If one would have fallen that I like in this draft, say like a Rashard Penny that would have fallen into the 3rd round or something like that, but he didn't. There's the guys that the PFF guys do like, and they went higher up. So I just didn't draft him because none really fell to me, and I wasn't going to push the issue on a position that's not really all that valuable when it comes to adding wins to it for a football team.
So let's say this. Let's review this part of the draft again. So let's say Rashard Penny's off the board, and there's Ronald Jones and Royce Freeman and Kerryon Johnson. Are you intrigued by any of those guys to draft any of those guys, or would you take your chances, with an undrafted free agent?
Yeah, I mean, I do like Ronald Jones quite a bit, actually. He's a guy that for us, he's our number 3 running back in the running back rankings. He's probably going to go pretty high, but he is a guy that I really like. If he would have fallen somewhere like in the 3rd round, I would jump on him. Royce Freeman is another guy that is intriguing. If he's a guy that's there in 3rd, 4th round or whatever, yeah, I might pull the trigger on him. He has some really good tape. He has some pretty impressive numbers. Kerryon Johnson's another guy. They both do a really good job breaking tackles and getting yards after contact. So yeah, I mean, there are players that if they fall into the right spot, and I'd say like with the Browns, they had a lot of picks and they've filled out the needs that they need. I might pull the trigger on them, but in this situation for this draft, because I did give up some later round picks to get some edge guys and some obviously Avonte Maddox in the corner. No, those are positions that were just a bigger need, but yeah, I mean, there might be situations like you said, if one of those guys like a Ronald Jones fell to the 3rd round, I would pull the trigger on him because that's a guy that I think will be like a Kareem Hunt if he falls to the 3rd round.
Right. Let's talk about the last 2 guys, Justin Lawler and is it Gerard Avery, linebacker?
Yeah, Gennard Avery. Yeah.
Gennard, yeah.
Yeah. So Justin Lawler is a guy that probably nobody knows about, but he was a guy that graded the number 1 edge rusher in the entire class. Obviously, playing at SMU and then a Group of 5 conference, he's going to be going up against lesser competition. So there is that caveat. But with Lawler, he was a guy that just got it done at a consistent basis. He had a pass rushing productivity, one of the best in the draft class at 13.2, extremely good against the run as well. And this is a guy that he's not very athletic. Nobody's going to be wowed by athleticism, but he just got it done, and he did it with multiple different moves. He was able to use power very effectively, use good pad leverage, and could bend the edge decently well for a guy his size and the lack of athleticism. So this is a guy that in our grading system and what our grade shows that when you have elite pass rushing in college, it does translate to the NFL. So it might take a couple of years for him to get to that point, but I think he's a guy that you could add really quality depth and could turn into a guy that either starts or gives you a good rotation in the pass rush.
All right. Going back to DJ Moore for a second, how does he compare to Cortland Sutton and Calvin Ridley as far as your rankings?
Yeah, so DJ Moore it comes out as our number 2 wide receiver in our rankings, and Calvin Ridley's number 1, Cortland Sutton's number 4. So, and these guys are really close together, and it's not like Ridley is so much better than like Sutton who's at 4. It was basically a cluster, and it was all right. Does this guy have one elite trait basically that's better than the rest? And for us, it was with Ridley and his just ability to get open deep down the field and his route running. We determined was the best of the group. But DJ Moore is another guy that we really like him, and obviously I took him at 35. His acceleration, quickness really stand out. He gets up the field extremely well. He does damage both on the outside and in the inside. He's forced 39 missed tackles on just 146 career receptions. And he's tough over the middle. So that's why I picked with DJ Moore. Calvin Ridley is a guy that, we obviously number 1 wide receiver on the board. We really like him, his ability to get open down the field. His age isn't a factor for us that much as some people would have it. Cortland Sutton is a guy that I really like. He was off the board before I could pick. I probably, in my opinion, would have taken him. I really liked him all 4 years that we've had grading on him. I saw him as he really popped it for me as a freshman, so I kind of have a soft spot for him. But he's a guy, obviously the size is there, but then he has the incredible movement skills. And then when he does have quite a few drops, which are concerning, but they're more just concentration drops, not the fact that he just can't catch the ball. So I think if he can just concentrate better, he'll be able to hold on to the ball a bit better. But he's extremely elusive in the open field. Doesn't matter for what size of a receiver he is, but especially for a 6'4" guy, it's really impressive.
So let's say the Browns do what you say and they take Baker Mayfield, or they go with Sam Darnold. But they come back around later in the draft and pick up a second quarterback, maybe in day 3. Because your draft ended at the 5th round. But let's say it's the 6th round. They say, hey, let's take a flyer on another quarterback. What quarterbacks are available who might be available in the 6th round you think they would take a flyer on?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the quarterback position kind of shakes out. I think Kyle Lauletta will probably be gone before the day 3. He's a guy that I did really like when we went back and normally we only grade the FBS competition, and then we'll get some FCS games when the FBS does play them. But we went back and graded all of Kyle Lauletta's games from Richmond, and he graded out really well, and he's an incredibly accurate player. But I think he might be gone. But he's a guy that if he does fall to day 3, I wouldn't blink if they took a flyer on him. Another guy is Mike White from Western Kentucky. Put up some really impressive numbers there. Fairly accurate, but he does struggle a bit under pressure. He's a guy that kind of lets that pressure rattle him more than you would like. Another guy is Logan Woodside out of Toledo. Really, really impressive numbers as well. His games when he had Cody Thompson, his top receiver there, were really impressive. It took him a little bit to kind of shake that, losing him when he got injured, but, throughout his career, it was really impressive. So those are some guys that I really like that, might fall to day 3 that, if the Browns wanted to take a quarterback, in the later day, those are some guys.
Right. And my last question is, so how does the trade work? Because, do you guys get, it's like a 10-minute clock and you guys negotiate things? So how does the trade work for when you were doing the mock?
Yeah, so we had we operate at PFF on Skype, and so we just created a Skype chat with a draft, and essentially we had a Google Doc that we were working off of. It's not exactly a 10-minute thing because we have, a lot of our company is in the U.S. and throughout the entire, time zones. And we have some of our company that's also still in the UK. And so, it might get stalled in the middle of the 3rd round because the guest guy that's up is in the UK and he's in bed. So, basically we just message each other, privately away from that chat to go, hey, I'll give you, I'll trade up with you. They'll give you my 1st and my 2nd round pick, if you want to do that or something like that. And that's basically how we did it. And we use, a lot of us use different types of, the draft trade value charts, or we have a couple of analytics guys that were there doing trades, and they were running their own simulations on the mock draft, which is, maybe a bit overkill, but, it is what it is. And, that's how we're doing it. It was a lot of fun, trying to barter with our coworkers, trying to make trades and, talking some smack, but it was a lot of good time, but that's basically how we came up with the trades. It was, going off of some of them, I know some of them were using the Jimmy Johnson chart, which in my opinion is, that's way outdated. And I was using the Harvard Analytics draft trade value chart, which, doesn't value the higher picks as much as the Jimmy Johnson one. And so that's, some differences in how people were valuing the picks and everything.
Wait a minute. There's a Harvard Analytics trade chart? Because the only thing, I knew there's other charts, but I knew the Jimmy Johnson charts got no, but there's a Harvard Analytics trade chart?
Yeah, so, if you, actually, this is a draft trade value chart created by Kevin Mears, who, if you know the Browns front office, he's actually one of the, analytical researchers for the Browns. He used to work for Football Outsiders, I think, he didn't work for them, but he did some articles for them. But the Browns hired him a number of years ago, and before he was hired, he had an article where he had a blog where he, one amongst things was looking at the value of draft picks and trying to decipher what any of the combine info means, if anything, and it really doesn't. But he created a draft value chart, and I went off of that. So I use that because it's like if I'm picking for the Browns, they might be using a similar type of chart, So
it would be kind of wild if I'm looking at the Browns draft and it looks exactly like yours.
I would be floored if they did that. Last year I went Myles Garrett, so I got the first pick right. So I can't complain there. But then I went Patrick Mahomes, and it was completely different after that. So I did pick some good players last year. I did pick Kareem Hunt and Marcus Williams, and Ryan Switzer, all guys that were really productive last year for their teams. But we'll see if I can get more than just one pick right this year.
Yeah. One last question. So how did you get involved with Pro Football Focus?
Yeah, so Pro Football Focus has always every single offseason looks for part-time analysts to join the team, and basically the part-timers will do player participation or base data collection, which player participation is just charting who's on the field, what position they play, basic information like that, and then base data is like essentially charting play-by-play data. So basically I applied, went through the trials, got hired, and this was in the 2014 off season before, I think it was Mike Pettin's first year for Browns fans that know that. And I was looking at, as a Browns fan, I was looking at, all right, who are these guys that they're adding besides the big name guys, because I want to know who's good and not. And so I came across PFF and saw that they were hiring, applied and got hired. And then after a season of doing it as part-time, I applied for the full-time position, and my work as a part-timer was good and stood out, and I got hired on full-time. I've been doing it ever since. And obviously my responsibilities since then have grown quite considerably. Instead of doing player participation, I'm now doing the grading and the analysis and stuff like that. So yeah, that's how I started.
It's like a scout. it's like you started to scout for the Browns.
It's a lot like that, and the hours are quite the same too during the season, because we're doing all the NFL games and all the NCAA games, and we're working basically on from Saturday until Wednesday, and it's like at least 12-hour days every single one of those days, and then it slows down for Thursday, and then if we're lucky we can get Friday off. But yeah, it's essentially like that. We're grading it probably a little differently than what a scout would do, but we're doing our production grades live, and then in the off season when we're looking at going back to the tape and seeing, all right, why did this guy grade? We're looking at from more of a scouting perspective of like, all right, this guy was winning from the outside because he can beat the offensive tackle with a really good bend and turning the corner. He uses his hands extremely well, that type of stuff. So that's where it changes for us, is when the season's over, we turn on the scout hats or whatever, and instead of the did he win or not type stuff. So like there is a difference in terms of how that gets shaken out. But yeah, I mean, ours is saying we don't travel like they do, but it's a lot of similarities, I'd say.
Right. Man, that's amazing. Well, John Kosko, thank you for the information. If people want to follow you and learn more about Pro Football Focus, where can they go?
ProFootballFocus.com. My Twitter handle is @PFF_John Kosko. That's KOSKO. We have a lot of great products over at PFF. If you want to check out our draft guide, which is something I used when I was making those draft picks in the mock, sign up for PFF Edge, which is a really good deal because you get the draft guide, you get the QB annual, which has advanced QB charting, which is ridiculous amounts of information. We're looking at not just whether it was caught or not, exactly where the ball placement was on it, what were the QB's reads on the play, was he in rhythm or not, stuff like that. And basically just going really deep dive into the quarterbacks. And then, you also get the grades that we have at PFF, and it's a really good deal. And I always put out here and there a 10% off or a $10 off coupon or discount to the PFF Edge subscription. So people can get it for, $30 for a year, which is a really good deal. So, stay tuned for our stuff because, especially when the draft comes up, we're going to have a lot of draft coverage on that on our website, and then we'll have some live video reaction to it as well.
And where will you be on draft day?
I'm going to be manning our big board and keeping that up to date. So I won't have, and I'll be doing some of the live reactions on our website. I won't be doing any of the video stuff, but I'll be doing, shooting blurbs about certain when they get drafted, certain players get drafted. I'll do a live reaction to that on our website. So that's what I'll do. I'm manning the big board and shooting some good draft stats about these guys that will be drafted.
Wow, fantastic. Well, thanks a lot, John.
Yeah, my pleasure, Kevin. Have a good one.
The Digital Life with Kevin Lockett.